Good afternoon, my dear classmates. Today I will talk about interlanguage theory. My name is Grayly Fernandez. Let's see the agenda of this presentation. First, I would like to introduce the definition of what interlanguage is. Second, let's see the characteristic of this theory. 3. As the third point, let's analyze the factors that influence the interlanguage theory. And number 4, we're going to see the developmental patterns. Let's analyze what interlanguage theory is. Interlanguage is a theoretical construct empirically confirmed, created as a result of a cognitive approach to languages. This theory can be also studied by observing how the language of the learner develops over the time. According to Brown in 1973, he states that interlanguage is a dynamic language system created by the second language learners. Furthermore, the variability of the learner's interlanguage it's mostly systematic, as I said before, because learners change their linguistic forms based on different linguistic or situational context. It is likely that learners will use target-like forms in formal environment while their own forms susceptible to changes will be used in informal environment. Now it is time to focus on the characteristics of this theory. First, we have that this theory is systematic. Why is it systematic? Because the students have a system of rules and they may not mirror the actual rules, but there are rules. For example, when student says, I go home or I goes to school. Secondly, this theory is dynamic. Why? Because the rules can change. Now, let's see this example. A student can say, I go home, and then they can say, I went home. Third, this is variable. Why? Because the learning process depends on the type of the language input and the context in which students receive language. Now let's see the 3 important factors in the interlanguage theory. The first one is the L1, the knowledge of the first language of the student. Second, we have the L2, which is the knowledge of the second language of the student, of what the students have. And the third one is the metalinguistics knowledge, which is the knowledge of languages in general. Theoretically speaking, we have the developmental pattern by Ellis in 1994. He states that the existence of developmental patterns can be determined by studying the order of acquisition of different second language structure or by following sequence of stages through which a learner passes on his/her way of mastering the second language. As the second patterns we have, when describing transitional structures, a developmental stage is said to consist of a period during which learners systematically use a particular form or structure, even though it does not include the usage of other forms of structure. Thirdly, the forms and structure used by learners at different time periods during the process of second language acquisition can be ordered in a way that one form of structure always precedes another. Last but not least, by acquiring some form or structure of a target language earlier and some later, learners progress step by step along an order or a sequence of acquisition. Now, it is important to see what method can be used of investigating developmental patterns. And we have the first method, which is error made by learners. There are various methods which can be used when investigating developmental patterns. One of the methods is to study errors made by the learners and to determine if they change and how they change over the time. Furthermore, developmental patterns can also be studied by collecting samples of the learners over a period of time in order to determine which linguistic feature emerges and when in the learner's language. According to this approach, acquisition is defined as the first occurrence, and it is said by Wells in 1985. This method is common for the first language acquisition research, but is also proposed as a method of investigating second language acquisition. Third, we have the occasion analysis. The usual method for description of developmental patterns is mandatory occasion analysis, as I said before. This method was clearly described by Brown in 1973, and the procedure is as follows. First, samples of a learner's language are collected in the natural environment. Second, obligatory occasions for the use of a specific target language forms are identified. It means that while using the second language, learners create occasions in which it is necessary to use a specific form of the target language, even though they do not always use it correctly. For example, a learner can say utterances such as I watched a good film yesterday and he come later for the show yesterday. It is important to mention how the interlanguage process is. And we have the first step, which is overgeneralization. Learners sometimes make mistakes because categories have exceptions. It means that learners put language in the wrong categories. Secondly, we have transfer, and it is how students understand and organize the second language information. When there are differences in the first and second language, transfer can lead learners to make errors. And when the first and the second language are the same, transfers help learners. Thirdly, we have internal sequence. It is when learners hear different languages. For example, in classrooms, they have different languages. Therefore, we expect that learners learn a second language in different ways. To sum up the interlanguage theory, it is therefore important to introduce the teachers to the notion of the interlanguage and developmental stages in order to observe the factors that hinder or facilitate their learners' progress, applying in an individualized approach to each learner, while at the same time observing the changes in the learner interlanguage on his or her way of mastering the second language. Observing the developmental path of a student's interlanguage remove the focus from describing and counting errors and make us understand that errors are to be expected in the development of the learner's second language and that they are, in fact, indicators of progress. So, interlanguage should be viewed as the linguistic potential that needs to be additionally explored and utilized in the future. So, thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, just let me know. Here you can see the references of this theory.